Okay, I have seen all of Living Single and most of The Nanny, and I did not realize till two of you pointed out in my comments that they have some of the same outfits. But we remember one of them more. Most people remember Fran's fashion and not Regine's because The Nanny hit more mainstream. And a lot of it has to do with who they are. Fran is Jewish, and that is consistently talked about throughout the show, but she is very light skinned, while Living Single was considered more of a black show. And I think this is an example of how the same qualities can be perceived differently depending on who embodies them. And this matters deeply in our workplaces and is why I do research on the unwritten rules of work and who they impact. Both of these characters use fashion as self expression, very brightly colored, perfectly tailored. They're both very attractive women. Both were confident, outspoken, never without a man. But Fran's style was considered culturally iconic. To this day, there are websites about it. And while I'm sure Regine is in more circles that watch Black TV, it's not talked about as much, even though it's sometimes literally the same outfits. And this translates to what we see in our workplaces every day. We have unwritten rules about whose ideas get celebrated and whose don't, who's seen as assertive versus who's seen as aggressive, and cultural expressions that are perceived as unique and out of the box versus unprofessional, who's stylish and who's gaudy. And this bias usually isn't conscious. We're simply comfortable with behaviors that we identify with, but we need to be aware of that. We just keep giving people who are like us more grace than others. So if you're a leader or an HR professional, I encourage you to audit who gets recognition in your workplace and why. Create explicit criteria for advancement that does not depend on just culture fit. Be very clear on what your dress code is and ask if it's work relevant. And if you're an early career professional, remember, while you may have to adapt to survive, this isn't about you and it's not a reflection of your value. Fran and Regine rocked the same styles, but were perceived differently, and their shows were perceived differently because of who they were. In our workplaces, let's recognize when we're giving some people more latitude than others, and that difference isn't bad. The most innovative workplaces don't have a problem with difference, they seek it out.